so-called AI experts. Just version 1. So the rate of improvement is really dramatic. I think that's the single biggest existential crisis that we face, and the most pressing one. I'm not normally an advocate of regulation and oversight. I mean, I think one should generally err on the side of minimizing those things. But this is a case where you have a very serious danger to the public. And therefore there needs to be a public body that has insight and then oversight on to confirm that everyone is developing AI safely. This is extremely important. I think the danger of AI is much greater than the danger of nuclear warheads by a lot. And nobody would suggest that we allow anyone to just build nuclear warheads if they want. That would be insane. And mark my words, AI is far more dangerous than nukes. Far. So why do we have no regulatory oversight? This is insane. I'm not really all that worried about the short-term stuff. Things that are... like narrow AI is not a species-level risk. It will result in dislocation, in lost jobs, and sort of better weaponry and that kind of thing. But it is not a fundamental species-level risk, whereas digital superintelligence is. So it's really all about laying the groundwork to make sure that if humanity collectively decides that creating digital superintelligence is the right move, then we should do so very, very carefully. Very, very carefully. This is the most important thing that we could possibly do. Well, I mean, there are other things that are on a longer time scale, and obviously the things that I believe in, like extending life beyond Earth, making life multiplanetary. I'm a big believer in sort of Asimov's Foundation series, or the principle that you really want to, I recommend reading the Foundation series, but it's like if you know that there's likely to be, we don't know, but there's likely to be another Dark Ages, which it seems, my guess is there probably will be at some point. I'm not predicting that about to enter dark ages, but that there's some probability that we will, particularly if there's a Third World War. Then we want to make sure that there's enough of a seed of human civilization somewhere else to bring civilization back, and perhaps shorten the length of the dark ages. I think that's why it's important to get a self-sustaining base, ideally on Mars, because Mars is far enough away from Earth that a war on Earth, the Mars base might survive. It's more likely to survive than a moon base. But I think a moon base and a Mars base that could perhaps help regenerate life back here on Earth would be really important, and to get that done before a possible World War III. Last century we had 2 massive world wars, 3 if you count the Cold War. I think it's unlikely that we will never have another world war again. There probably will be at some point. Yeah, it just could be radioactive rubble. So, again, I'm not predicting. It just seems like, well, if you say given enough time, will it be? Most likely, given enough time. This has been our pattern in the past. But I think sustainable energy is also obviously really important. It's tautological. If it's not sustainable, it's unsustainable. Well, I think that the core technologies are there with wind, solar, with batteries. The fundamental problem is that there's an unpriced externality in the cost of CO2. The market economics works very well if things are priced correctly, but when things are not priced correctly, and something that has a real cost has zero cost, then that's where you get distortions in the market that inhibit the progress of other technologies. So essentially anything that produces carbon, it puts carbon into the atmosphere, which includes rockets, by the way, so I'm not excluding rockets from this. There has to be a price, and that you can start off with a low price, but then that price, and then depending upon whether that price has any effect on the parts per million of CO2 in the atmosphere, you can adjust that price up or down. But in the absence of a price, we sort of pretend that digging trillions of tons of fossil fuels from deep under the earth and putting it into the atmosphere, we're pretending that has no probability of a bad outcome. And the entire scientific community is saying, obviously, it's going to have a bad outcome. Obviously, you're changing the chemical constituency of the atmosphere. So it's really up to people and governments to put a price on carbon, and then automatically the right thing happens. It's really straightforward. It sounds like I'm backtracking, but there's actually an argument that more carbon in the atmosphere is actually good, but up to a point. So we might actually arguably have been a little carbon starved. If you go back 200 years ago and say, okay, a few hundred years ago we had like 280, 290 parts per million of carbon. We're probably a little carbon starved. Now we're about 400, just past 400 mark. I think somewhere in the 400s, probably okay. We don't have to worry about sequestering carbon or anything like that. But now, if this momentum keeps going, and we start going up to 600, 800, 1,000, 1,500, that's where things get really squirrely. The sheer momentum of the world's energy infrastructure is leading us in that direction. So it's just very important that the public and the governments push to ensure that the correct price of carbon is paid. That will be the thing that matters. Well, right now the only things that are really stressing me out in a big way are AI, obviously. There's somebody who, I can't remember his name, but had a good suggestion for what the optimization of the AI should be. What's its utility function? You have to be careful about this, because if you say maximize happiness, And the AI concludes that happiness is a function of dopamine and serotonin, so it captures all humans and injects your brain with large amounts of dopamine and serotonin. Like, okay, it's not what we meant. Well, I like the definition of, like, the AI should try to maximize the freedom of action of humanity. Maximize the freedom of action. Maximize freedom, essentially. I like that definition.